Hey, what's up, everybody? I figured I'd finally give my thoughts on what I thought about um, Halloween Ends, which is considered the concluding chapter of the Gordon Green, Halloween trilogy that started with the 2018 movie, which, of course, at the time was celebrating 40 years, since the original Halloween. And the concept of this concluding chapter of this trilogy taking place 4 years after the events of Halloween Kills, deals with Laurie Strode, I guess for once in her life, instead of, her life being built around, the fear, and the trauma of, you know, Michael Myers, she tries to, like, I guess, build up a life for herself, and even, writing a memoir, and even, attempts to, like, recapture a romance with Officer Frank, which she has feelings for, which was kind of nice to see a more gentler, more softer side of Laurie, you know, that was kind of lost, after the original movie. Even though like her attempts of flirting, are a little awkward since she dealt with like a traumatic ordeal, and of course, her granddaughter Allison, attempts to, I guess, in a sense, rebuild a life of her own, by being a nurse in Haddonfield, after the loss of, her mom, dad, and boyfriend. And of course, she also tries to attempt at romance with, a guy named, Rohan, which, in a sense, Rohan's story is, oh, I'm sorry, Corey Cunningham, my mistake. It kind of parallels like a younger version of, you know, Laurie's, story. And the reason I say it parallels, Laurie's story, because like Laurie, he went through a traumatic ordeal, but in his case, it was the accidental death of one of the kids he was babysitting named Jeremy, which, of course, even though it was an accident, he was like blamed for it, and in a sense kind of became like the, the pariah, black sheep of Haddonfield, in a sense, like, Laurie, did. But in Laurie's case, she was, blamed for the, the slaughter, what happened in Haddonfield, even though it wasn't entirely her fault. But people associate her with, Michael's, disappearance, and and he also went to hiding, after the events of Halloween Kills, and in a sense that also is somewhat of an homage to Resurrection of sorts, the best not be spoken of movie, which in a sense undid, the, Laurie's happy ending of H2O, which, in my personal opinion, H2O, I think, had, a much better, conclusion to Laurie's arc, but I'm gonna get more into that. So, basically, I mean, Laurie, in a sense, kind of sees herself, through Corey, and I guess she tries to help him through his traumatic ordeals. The two of them, relate to, trauma and being, outcast in the town of Haddonfield. But in a sense, Corey starts to become almost like, how would they say, like a, you know, like a parallel, opposite of Laurie. Instead of, trauma, making him a stronger character, kind of causes him to like lose it, mentally, and of course, those that don't want to be spoiled, one of the aspects I kind of didn't like about and was kind of like how it did ended up going with the copycat, killer concept that was originally intended for H2O, but thankfully was abandoned in this movie. I mean, in that movie. And of course, you know, I'm glad Laurie, like I said, was given a more stronger character arc and wasn't sidelined like the way she was in, the 81 version of Halloween 2 and Kills, which, was nice to see her at the forefront. Again, however, the movie did have some downsides, particularly, the build up between, her and Michael facing off, since, Michael in itself is kind of like a very underused character, and this installment not even appearing, that much, in the movie, and kind of silent like the way Laurie was in the previous, entry. And I will say, even though the face off against you know, Laurie and Michael's good and intense, but the problem was it felt like it was too brief, and it felt like there was like no build up towards, you know, Laurie and Michael facing off, but it rather felt more like coincidental, you know, rather than, you know, something that was in, you know, in the making. And kind of like the narrative structure of the 2018 trilogy has kind of been like a mess, since in the 2018 version, you know, Michael's, you know, like, you know, more human than in, you know, Halloween Kills. It's kind of like he's like a super you know, entity, you know, like the more he kills, the more he transcends, which in Halloween Ends, that kind of storyline seems to be forgotten here. And to bring up a point, it kind of reminds me of the Star Wars sequel trilogy, in which, you know, it started off good, you know, with a lot of potential and promise, but it kind of felt like with each preceding installment, it felt like it got progressively worse. But in terms of, do I think Halloween Ends is better than Kills? I would say to an extent it is, and it develops the characters much better than Kills did, and they're not seen as throwaway props like the way Kills was. But, you know, I kind of felt like on a whole the film kind of felt like somewhat underwhelming. It could have been much better than what it was. And, you know, the biggest aspect, you know, of the film is like, oh, even though you see, you know, Lindsay come back and Frank come back, but it kind of felt like their characters were underused. And I guess the biggest takeaway, does Laurie get a better ending than she did, you know, in Resurrection? To answer, you know, that question for people without giving too much away, I would say yes. The character does get a better send off, I mean, compared to that film. However, in terms of like the build up of her and Michael facing off and the character giving an overall stronger arc, I would have to say that goes to H2O, since I felt like it was more realistically portrayed, you know, on Laurie and Michael facing off, which I thought that movie did a better job of. Overall, I would say, you know, Ends is an improvement of sorts on Kills, but I felt, like I said, narrative, you know, wise, it felt like a little underwhelming, and it felt like it was trying to do a little too much. And, you know, of course, sidelighting Michael to almost, you know, a cameo. It didn't really help. But like I said, for those that are big fans of the Halloween franchise, I would definitely say if people want to see how Laurie and Michael's story ends, check it out just to see. But that's pretty much all there is to say about it. All right, everyone, thanks again.